Hello, everybody. James and Phil here for the Sunderland Echo. Let's get straight into it. Sunderland drew 1-1 with Middlesbrough at the Riverside Stadium at the weekend. Phil, you were there. I watched it on Sky. Struggling a little bit with large parts of this performance and said so on social media after having sort of analysed the game a little bit more, probably on reflection, a good point. How did you see it?
Yeah, I thought it was a really strange game. The first half, I thought that Middlesbrough at times played some really, really nice football, played through the lines. I felt like they were the team who you could sort of more see a vision, if you like, or an identity, and maybe that just makes sense given how long Michael Carrick's been in charge there now. Well, it's only just over a year, but by Championship standards, that's pretty long. Yeah, and undeniably though, Sunderland had some big moments in that half. And obviously Abdullah Ba's miss being the biggest one. So yeah, it was an even game in the first half. Middlesbrough perhaps playing the better football, Sunderland perhaps having the better sort of actual goal-mouth chances. Second half, I thought was absolutely dismal from a Sunderland perspective.
I agree.
Really seriously poor.
Such a tough watch at times in the second half.
Yeah, right up until the moment that Rusin takes a shot on his right foot and beats the goalkeeper. Well, I would say at the time, I just thought that's a massive goalkeeper error. And I still think that it clearly was. But I think you actually, when you watch it back, you have to give Rusin a lot of credit because he catches the goalkeeper out. He takes it on his right foot, which the goalkeeper's obviously not expecting. That's why he's sort of caught off guard and makes the error. So, yeah, I think given the way we've talked about strikers all season, we also have to give a bit of credit to Rusin for being a bit opportunistic, really. And you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket and all that. So that was good. And then to be fair, Sunderland were completely dominant after that, which was really, really, really strange. Clarke was unplayable. And if any team was going to win it, it was going to be Sunderland. So I think you have to be fair and say that in the context of the whole 90 minutes, Sunderland deserved their point. I do actually think that. Having said that, you have to say that there was large parts of that second half that were pretty concerned and moving forward. What I would also say as well is I know Middlesbrough have got some sort of injury and availability issues at the moment. I thought Carrick's subs weakened their side dramatically. And I thought that was really important in allowing Sunderland to get back into the game. So,
which coincided
in different results. Yeah, for sure. And I thought they came 5 minutes too late, personally. But, they did come. And they were good subs. Rusin, really effective. Just put so much energy into the game. Sometimes it's the simple things, isn't it? He just got Sunderland up the pitch, put some pressure on Middlesbrough's defenders. And although it wasn't the most explosive Patrick Roberts performance we've ever seen, I thought Ba, having actually had a really good first half, it pretty much sort of vanished from the game, really. So that was a good call as well. So, yeah, good point, indifferent display. And what I would say now is, whatever you think about Beale, the direction of the team, and I have a lot of reservations about the top six for both teams. Actually, I think they're both missing, that clinical edge in the final third. What you have to say now is when you look at the next four fixtures, all teams in the bottom half, three of them at home, there is an opportunity here for Sunderland and for Beale. So, yeah, maybe at the end of those four games, we should be looking at this and saying, well, it wasn't great, but wow, what a big point that could prove to be, given what we've done since. The onus is on, obviously, Beale and players to go and take advantage of that now.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying about deserving the point, and I do agree. And this is a bit of a contradiction, but I just think Middlesbrough with a better side overall. I know Sunderland looked like they could win it in the last 5 minutes, but Sunderland scored on 84 minutes, so that for large portions of that second half, they were second best. I thought the game was fairly even in the first half. For Abdullah Ba's chance, which he should have scored, there was Azaz's chance for Middlesbrough, which he arguably could have done better with. I just thought it was a strange game, but yeah, 1-1, probably a fair result on balance. The big thing coming into the game, Phil, when the team sheet was mentioned, was that Leo Hjelde got his debut at left back. I was a big fan of this. It allowed Trey Hume to go straight to right back, where he's so much more effective in terms of his attacking game and contribution. I thought he was arguably Sunderland's best player, other than Clarke. Rusin obviously in with a shout as well. What did you think of Hjelde and his debut? I personally thought it was pretty solid. He grew into it, and I think he looks a decent find, actually.
Solid's the word I would use, yeah. There were quite a few sort of errors in possession, passes straight out of play.
You'd expect that, though, wouldn't you?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, there was one in the first half where he got caught on the ball, but I think having trained so little with his new teammates, to be put into a game of that intensity as well against a good championship side, having played so little football recently, I think you have to say that some of that was to be expected. Defensively, looks pretty strong. Made one really good covering challenge to stop Force getting tap in quite shortly before the first goal, actually. And he's got real height as well, which I think is something that, given what we've talked about with Sunderland over the last year, that's something that so often they've been massively lacking. I think it was a good call from Bale to put him in. As he said, it would have been easy to keep it the same because Seal had done okay in the previous weeks, but Hume made a big difference playing in his strongest position, as you said. So, I thought it was a really solid debut. It was interesting after the game, he sort of spoke to me and said that he's very much a sort of a centre-half first rather than a left-back. But obviously at the moment Sunderland need him at left-back and he looked pretty comfortable in that role. So it'd be interesting to see how that develops actually over the long term, because I asked Beale last week about at the press conference about Callum Styles, because obviously we know Callum's a sort of midfielder / left wing back. Yeah. And Beale's answer to me made very clear that he saw Styles in this group and this team at the moment as a left back first and foremost. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that competition develops when Styles is fit in a week or two's time. But I think given that all the factors in terms of coming in for his first game, it was pretty solid stuff from Hjelde.
Yeah, good performance. Let's talk a little bit about refereeing decisions. We don't like to pick the bones of refereeing decisions on this podcast. And to be fair, these two were very minor, but Sam Greenwood, I think, probably should have been shown a yellow card before he was fully. He definitely put himself about. And to be fair, I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of his. He did well for Middlesbrough. It was quite nice to watch in a sense, knowing that he's a Sunderland lad. Obviously, doing it against Sunderland isn't so nice to watch. But he was involved in Middlesbrough's free kick, which was a brilliant move, but arguably shouldn't have been given against Dan Neil, that one.
No, I watched the replay back. It looks to me like Neil's fouled first, I think. I thought that was, probably the wrong decision. The one thing I would say is that, for sure, I think Sunderland were a bit unfortunate there, but Middlesbrough was so dominant in that phase, that particular phase of the game, that I find it quite difficult to really settle on that as a major factor in the game. I know that's a ridiculous thing to say because it did lead to a goal.
No, I agree.
But I just feel Middlesbrough was so dominant at that point that a goal was coming. So I do think Neil was fouled first, but it's not something I would personally dwell on in the context of the game, because I think that Middlesbrough at that stage were by far the better team and were creating big openings. So I do think there was a good chance a goal was on the way anyway. And I agree with you on Greenwood, actually. I thought he was very, very fortunate not to get booked earlier. But that was because it was a series of niggling fouls rather than anything particularly sort of violent, if you like. And I think that's why he got away with it. But he was a real menace, really. He made those little runs off the shoulder. He didn't really give Sunderland's defence any time on the ball. I thought he did really well, and you can see that he's not far from being a really, really seriously top prospect. But as we've talked a lot about with Sunderland's attackers, it's the finishing, isn't it? And I think that when you came away from that game with both sides, you think, these are two decent teams. I could definitely see them making it into the playoffs. But that lack of execution in the final third is so glaring for both teams, I think. And it makes me think that both have got a real battle on to get into the top six, personally. I actually went back and I mentioned this on our On the Whistle YouTube video, just giving it a little plug there. But
great name for it.
I've completely forgot my point now. I actually went and looked at half time at the two teams from the 2-0 game at Stadium of Light, which was January last year. And I felt actually you could really see what the difference was between the teams then and now. Riley McGree, who obviously was away at the Asia Cup for this game, Tuber Akpom, Ross Stewart, Ahmed Diallo. There's a real difference, I think, in quality in the final third, which is not to say that the teams don't have talented players in the final third. I think there's some fantastic prospects there. Azaz is a prospect, Greenwood's a prospect. I still think Bar's a really good prospect. So it's, something you can see that both teams have gone down a slightly different route in terms of they're trying to invest in their squads and grow assets who've potentially got a big resale value. At the moment, I think that they're both a bit lacking in the final third. And at the moment, I feel like they're outsiders for the playoff race, but I suppose time will tell on that one.
Shall we talk about Abdullah Ba? We mentioned his miss earlier. He's got a score there. We're big Abdullah Ba fans. We spoke about him after the Stoke City game. He'd started to have an impact on Sunderland. He'd got, I think it was 3 assists in his last 2 coming into the game, and he'd scored, obviously deputising for Patrick Roberts on that right-hand side. And it just feels with Abdullah Ba that it's oftentimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and that certainly felt like one yesterday against Middlesbrough. But what I will say is that he copped a lot of flack for that. It was brilliant defending. Yes, he should score, but it was exceptional defending. We must mention that. And other than not taking that chance, I actually thought by and large he turned in a reasonable performance. It wasn't as if Abdullah Ba was awful. Yes, in that clutch moment, it hasn't quite come off for him, but it wasn't horrendous. It wasn't sort of a regression to the old Abdullah Ba that we've seen previously.
No, first half, I thought he was really, really good. And the one thing I would say about the misses, yes, he's got to score, but Ba is one of the few Sunderland players in this squad who consistently gets into those positions. It's no coincidence that he scored from a similar area against Stoke last week and had a big chance against Borough. His goal contributions this season from not a huge amount of playing minutes kind of speak for themselves. So I personally am quite willing to forgive somebody missing those chances, because what this team has been crying out for so much of the season is players who attack the 6-yard box and get in those positions. And if he keeps doing that, he's going to score a lot of goals. I do think that he was one of many players, and I mean, you could name pretty much the whole team, who dropped off significantly at the start of the second half. Didn't really hold the ball up, didn't really impact the game. But I say that's not picking on Ba, that was pretty much the whole team. But he was definitely in that category of player who didn't maintain that performance level from the first half. But I think he's making really, really good progress, to be honest. I know he wants to play in a more I say wants to play, he wants to play in the team. He's not bothered where, but I think he would describe himself as a player who would play in central areas as an 8 or a 10. But for me right now, I think it's working really well for him to be settled as a right winger, to keep going in that role. And I think he's bringing something a bit different to the side, and he's given himself a chance really to push on, because I don't think Roberts is going to come straight back into the team. I think Barr is doing enough in terms of getting into those goal scoring areas, obviously big contributions against Stoke, to get another start. And I think he should get another start, whether that's on Saturday or whether it's in the midweek game against Huddersfield or whether it's both. I think we need to. It's always difficult because it is undoubtedly a huge one in the game. If someone go in 1-0 up, then they could go on and get a massive win. But I do think you need to look slightly past the fact that he missed that chance and just, I think there should be some positivity about what he's doing at the moment. That's my view anyway.
Do you think with Roberts fit that Michael Beale will look past that and resist the urge to bring Roberts back in? I'm just thinking of the striker situation between Burstow and Rusyn, where one's scored and then one's not scored, and he dropped out. Somebody else has come in and they've dropped back out, and it's sort of been a bit of a hot potato. Do you think Michael Beale will stick with Barr on that right hand side?
Yeah, I think he will. I think he will for the Plymouth game, because I think it's sometimes, we know the schedule's a challenge, but sometimes these 3-game week like Sunderland's have got coming up can be a little bit of a blessing for the head coach, really, because I think you can give Barr another go at Plymouth to try and build on what he's doing at the moment, knowing that you've got Roberts on the bench. And if Barr doesn't quite do it against Plymouth, then you can bring Roberts back for Huddersfield. And to be honest, maybe that's best for both of them. You want to manage Roberts coming back from a muscle injury where he's been missing for over a month anyway. So for me, I think Barr has to start against Plymouth. That's just my view. And I say that as one of the biggest Patrick Roberts fans in Sunderland, because I absolutely love watching him play. But I think you've got to be fair as well to the person who has the shirt. And I think for all, like I say, looking past his miss, which clearly, is a significant factor in the game, I think he's done enough to start against Plymouth, and then we'll take it from there. The one thing I would throw into the mix as well is I do feel like there's a really interesting debate with Rusyn, because, we know that he came to Sunderland playing most of his football playing off the left. I know we're talking about the right flank, but, at some point, are we going to debate whether Rusyn plays as one of the 2 wide players rather than as the centre forward through the middle? Because we've seen that his hold-up play is okay. He puts himself about, but it's not his natural game. He's not really someone who wants to come and link the play and drop deep and play little 1-2s with the midfielders. He wants to burst in field, doesn't he? And he wants to run into space. And I wonder if in the long term, maybe someone who is going to operate as a bit more of a sort of half striker, half winger for Sunderland. I think that's a really interesting conundrum for Beale going forward. At the moment, he probably can't afford to do that because he's got loads of brilliant informed wingers and he hasn't got any real brilliant informed strikers. So I think Rusin might have to stay down the middle for now. But it's something I think to keep an eye on in the long run, because I thought that goal was a great example of how much more comfortable he seems sort of operating it wide and attacking the goal from out there.
Yeah, and obviously it's his shirt to lose up front now. You would think, obviously, coming on in the second half, Burstow was preferred after getting that goal recently. Tough afternoon for Burstow, you would say. I think personally that Rusin just looks like he has a bit more, and I think this is an age and an experience thing as well, a bit more sort of urgency about his Sunderland career, if you know what I mean. I feel that's not a knock on Burstow. I just feel like Rusin possibly has his head more in the game. I know Burstow's a lot younger. He's a younger player. He's in a different environment to his home club in Chelsea. But I think Rusin needs that shirt for 10 games. None of this in-out sort of thing. Where he can play Rusin, I think he needs to stick with him because he's our player as well at the end of the day. So it's in our interests to get him going.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. And I think especially we mentioned at the start of the pod, about a run of games that really Sunderland should be really attacking and hoping to kick on. I do wonder if there's an opportunity there to give Rusin, like you say, more of a run and more of a sort of a go at it. I thought Burstow had a good game against Stoke, and I thought he really struggled yesterday. So I'm not kind of jumping to any major opinions either way. What I would say as well is I thought Vandenberg was, in my opinion, aside from Clarke, I thought he was one of the best players on the pitch yesterday.
Very good, yeah.
Obviously, you don't get a huge amount of chance to see other players in the Championship week in, week out. He made quite a big impression on me. I thought he was excellent. So that was a factor in it as well. Dale Fry is obviously a very experienced Championship campaigner now in the same way that Dan Ballard is. So not the easiest of assignments, but I think the energy that Rusin brought, I think that was the key thing, chasing lost causes, getting his team up the pitch just by applying a bit of pressure. I think it was so important in the way the game developed, and I'm inclined to agree. I don't necessarily mean it as a knock on Burstow, like I say, because I thought he did do well against Stoke, and so we shouldn't overreact the other way after the next game. But I do think maybe there's opportunity here to just really build Rusin up and say, go on, have a few games at it, see what you can do.
I want to whiz through another couple of points just before we call time on the podcast. But Jack Clarke getting the assist for Rusin's goal, 17th goal contribution of the season, 4th assist with 13 goals in the league as well. Sort of running out of things to say, Phil, really, isn't it? It's sort of like, what is the headline now? Jack Clarke, very good at football. Sunderland over-reliant on him. It's just like, what else do you say? He was one of the players really in the second half where the levels didn't really drop, and he kept running, looked like a creative outlet. Yeah, I'm running out of things to say. It's all that's left to say really is it's a good job we've got for the next 6 months.
Yeah, I thought it was like Middlesbrough would have been so frustrated because they denied him. And I have to say as well, we sort of said Ba struggled at the start of the second half and that someone needed more of him. That was true of Clarke as well. Definitely sort of disappeared from the game a bit just after half time. But my word, did he come back from that in the second half of the second half, if you like. But yeah, Middlesbrough had been so effective in denying any service to him for all that second half. The brilliance of Clarke at the moment is the one time they left him any space on the break, he exploited it absolutely ruthlessly. And that's where he is at the moment. Can't remember which goal it was the other week where he carried the ball about 60 yards up the pitch, but it was very, very similar.
And he set up Ba's chance as well.
Rusin's goal against Preston, that's the one I'm thinking of, where Preston had done an okay job and then just to leave him once and he just turns it into a goal. He's a really, really special talent. And I think the big thing for me is with Clarke compared to when he came in, when he was a very talented player with a lot of natural ability, is that he's a lot more unpredictable now than people give him credit for. There is this perception of Clarke is that, he cuts insides and shoots. Actually, if you watch him, he goes down the outside just as much now. And the amount of good crosses he gets into the 6-yard box with his left foot, it's such a huge difference to where he came into his sort of Sunderland career, if you like. And that tells you everything you need to know. It tells you that he's learning, that he's developing, that he's committed to his craft on the training ground. It's a spectacular season, really. I am of the opinion now that if Sunderland don't go up, I think it's going to be nigh and impossible to keep him because of the level that he's at now. I think we're now at a point where I think teams are going to push the button. They're going to go up that big bid that's going to be almost impossible for someone to turn down. But, there's a lot of football still to be played and we shouldn't talk dismissively. I said before, because of certain issues, I see Sunderland and Borough as outsiders of the playoffs, but Sunderland are right there they are right in the mix, and so we shouldn't discount them at this stage, not by a long shot.
One of Sunderland's other top performances, I thought, on the day was Dan Ballard. Another really, really good display. Slight injury worry from him at the end of the game. What did Michael Beale say about that, Phil?
He said he was fine. He said Dan's no Southern softie, which whether that was a fairly pointed comment after what had gone on a couple of weeks before, I don't know. But we'll let that one go, I think. But he said he was fine. So. Hopefully that he did say don't come back to me if that proves not to be the case. So hopefully that's not a misdiagnosis from Bale. But Ballard told him he'd just fallen awkwardly and was in a bit of pain. But apparently there doesn't appear to be any suggestion that it's a broken collarbone or a dislocated shoulder or anything like that. So fingers crossed he should be available. For Saturday.
He managed to avoid that pesky 10th yellow card as well. He's been at 9 for a good 2 or 3 games now.
There was definitely one moment where I thought, here we go. But to be honest, I think, listen, we've spoken about a couple of the yellow cards, haven't we, on this podcast that were quite unnecessary. I think there's been a couple for dissent, which is something that obviously, same goes for Ba as well, by the way, that you really want to sort of him to cut out of his game. But by and large, if he gets booked for a challenge or stopping an attack, that's just the game. And I think the good thing is sort of we all, when Ballard and 09 both got suspended for that Birmingham game, we were all sort of, it was a deep intake of breath, wasn't it? We were like, we don't know if these guys behind them are good enough. Well, we know now that Seal is good enough. Obviously, he's not at Ballard's level at the moment, but he's ready to play 2 games if he's required. And watching Hjelde at Borough, you can quite clearly see that if we need to shift him inside for a game at centre-half, that's also not going to be a problem. So I'm not saying it's fine. Ballard's one of the best defenders in the division and Sunderland are much better off without him. But whereas, 6 weeks ago, that would have had me sweating. Ultimately, that's what Seal's there for. And I think he's more than good enough to contribute. So not as big a worry as it was at one stage. And obviously the main thing is that, there doesn't appear to be a serious injury there that's going to keep him out for a long time, because that would be a huge blow.
Yeah, I like Sealton. I'm looking forward to seeing him at centre-back at some point. Obviously not looking forward to Dan Ballard being suspended. I think Luke O'Nine's on 8 as well, actually, so that might be one to watch. Just quickly, Phil, before we round off the end of the podcast, Sunderland's midfield, I thought, ran into a few challenges against Middlesbrough, who had a very good midfield of their own. You have to note that. Joe Bellingham is a player who Sunderland fans a lot of Sunderland fans continue to insist that he might need a rest at some point. He has played a lot of football. It's something we've spoken about on this podcast. What are your views on that? What do you think Michael Beale will do? I think, for me, when you look at Joe Bellingham, it's a massive compliment that we sort of forget that he's, 18, only just turned 18, and he's one of the first names on Sunderland's team sheets. People make the comparison to Callum Doyle during that League One season. At some point, you just feel that he might be in danger of getting burnt out, and is that really good for his development?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. The first thing, as you say, is the starting point with this discussion should be saying he's having a fantastic season.
Yeah, he is.
A fantastic bit of business from Sunderland to bring him into the club. It's only positives from there. I do agree that I think his playing time needs to be balanced. I know Sunderland's view very much is, at the moment, it's only 1 game per week and that they can manage his training load, and therefore the fans shouldn't be too worried about that. I don't think his performance levels at the moment are where they were right at the very start of the season. That's just my opinion. I could understand it more from the Middlesbrough game because there was a clear desire to go for 4-3-3, wasn't there? And he obviously wanted some athleticism and some physicality in his midfield. So I can understand why, with Pritchard gone, he went with Job rather than an Al-Shish or a more attacking-minded midfielder, if you like. Maybe with the 3 home games that are coming up in the next 4, is there an opportunity there to give Job a rest and maybe give Al-Shish a start, or maybe bring Chris Rigg in? I do think I can sort of understand. I can understand why he played yesterday, would be my opinion. I do think moving forward, there's a need to manage his workload, and I think these home games should hopefully give a real opportunity to do that, and maybe allow Beale to make it more of an attacking selection as well, which you would think he would have to do, because they're really important games where Sunderland, I think if Sunderland get in the top 6, they need 2 or 3 wins from these next 4 games. So the onus will be on them to go and do that, and maybe that will sort of create a neat opportunity for Job just to sit one out. You've just gone silent, James, but I'm sure it's an amazing point to make. No.
How about now?
There we go. You're back.
Happy days. I've got no idea what happened. I'm going to blame the work laptop. So, is sort of Job suffering as a result of the role he's being asked to play? And I ask this because I feel like we've been through this with Dan Neil and Ekwa as well. Obviously, Dan Neil probably sees himself as more of a number 8. He's now playing as the 6. Ekwa's playing a little bit further forward. We know Job can play up front, but probably likes to play more as a 10. He's now sort of that number 8. The playing as a 3, sort of central rather than a 2 and 1 forward. And it just feels like there's some working out to do in that Sunderland midfield still. And Job's maybe a casualty at the moment.
Yeah, I agree about the balance generally. What I would say is I think both Job and Sunderland's view is that his long-term position probably is as a box-to-box number 8. So I'm not sure in this particular instance that's really the case, because I think that is the position where he most sort of sees himself at the moment, and where the club see him as well. So I think there is a bit, the balance of that midfield I don't think is quite right at the moment. But it's one of those where at the moment there's just such a huge difference between how the supporters view it and how the club view it. And we keep asking the questions about it because, rightly so, we think it's a big talking point, and the club just, whoever it is, whether it's Speakman or Michael Beale, just give the same sort of answer back, and we kind of get nowhere with it. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that develops, because Sunderland do have a lot of options to play as a 10. Job's obviously one of them. Aushish is another. Dak when he's fit. Chris Rigg. But nobody really this season has managed the consistency that Pritchard did. So, yeah, I think there's a big task. Thanks, David Priest, who's commenting on the this is actually from Iceland, David. So, yeah, it is one of my prized possessions. Thanks very much. Good to have you listening, mate. So, yeah, he's completely put me off there. Yeah, I do think that Job's best position is as an 8, but I think in the coming weeks, I think maybe we'll see an opportunity for Aushish, or maybe even Chris Rigg. I think that would be one to watch as well. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him get that chance.
Happy days. Well, we'll probably end the podcast there. You can follow all of the build-up to the Plymouth Argyle game over at the Sunderland Echo website. You can follow us all over social media as well. This will be available on YouTube and all good podcast places. Phil, thanks for joining us, and thanks for tuning in.